Hello.
Um, Thank you for joining this call. So I'll introduce yourself and I'll start by asking you a few questions.
Sure.
So first of all, thank you for Venue That Live for helping us hosting this event. To introduce Prasanna, you started as an intern in Google in 2006. Then you joined Microsoft, where at some point I heard you stopped going to work and got fired.
Yes, yes. That's
you
famous.
uh, you ranked you ranked number one on India top coder at the age of 18. Um, You founded your first company in 2009, Like a Little, a campus social network where you grew to 20 million page views. Um, you turned down some $100 million offer acquisition from Google and Facebook. You then joined Zenefit as a director of engineering, um, where you met your actual co-founder, and then you built Rippling, took funding, and took a year to build the MVP, almost a year, I think. And you've been working there for 8 years now. And you're also a founder of ZeroX People to follow on-chain activities.
Yeah, I no longer work at Rippling. I'm full time on ZeroX people now. But yeah,
Okay,
pretty good.
I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. If anybody
Anytime.
has questions during this talk, feel free to ask it in the question tab or in the chat, and I'll bring them up for people. So, my first question: What So it's more about your career beginnings. What sparked your interest in technology, and who were your early influences or mentors in the field?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I was an average student. My dad got a computer at my house, when I was in like 10th standard or something. And, um, you know, like most people with computers, like, started off playing a lot of video games. Like that is my inspiration to computers, right? Like, um, you know, and then, uh, and then fell in love with this thing, man. Like, it was so simple. It has like just 8 instructions or 10 instructions, right? You can add, subtract, multiply, jump, just like 8 instructions. Everything else is sort of derived from that. And like most subjects, you need to learn a lot and like think a little. And like computers was like, you need to learn a little and think a lot. So it was just like so much fun. So so much creativity, and like there's not a lot to learn, and there's a lot you can do with it. So just got addicted to it. You know Continued to be an average student all through, but spent a lot of time on computers.
Did you have anybody who influenced you, or some mentors that you really looked up onto?
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, um, my first book in computers, like, is this weird book. Actually, I mean, nobody would have, very few might have heard of it. Like, it's a book called TSR through C. Back in the day, it starts off with like, how hackers are burning the midnight oil to figure out how to like multitask inside MS DOS, right? Somehow, they like Microsoft launched a printer, and the printer is printing while you can actually work on your computer. Like, how did they accomplish that? How does printer like continue to print when you're like typing things in? Back in the day, like, Microsoft had some things called interrupts, and like they had like programmed around it, and like some programmers figured out how to hook into that interrupts and like run programs in the background in MS DOS. It was like such a fun book for me. It read like a crime novel or like a crime thriller, and you could actually do it. You could actually like run these, build these programs yourself. So I got like very inspired by like things like that. People who are like, finding things on first principles, doing like playing with the computer, doing things themselves. And yeah, I found that like super fascinating. um, and then beyond that, like, I got introduced into this sort of field of like algorithms, and like a better way by which, a faster way by which a computer could do the same thing. I got introduced to it. uh, and I kind of like fell in love with it. Spent a lot of time doing that stuff during my college days. I thought a lot of those things. Yeah, yeah, someone is like, you ping the link. Yeah, that's the book.
Yeah.
It's like totally redundant, right? Like it's totally useless these days. But that was like, during my college days. Like I'm pretty old. I'm like 37 now. During my college days,
It's
like,
okay.
that. That was I that that was the bug that bit me. Um, yeah, and then I sort of did a lot of algorithms and things like that. Again, I found them like super pure. I found the space to be like, how you can sort of think from first principles, like reason from first principles without a lot of knowledge, and like figure out patterns, of like how to compute something efficiently, or like things like that. So there are a lot of like mentors and people that I looked up to. I mean, it was also during my time actually, when I was actually growing up. For the first time, like there was a new kind of job in the world, like where you could have a billion people all over the world, and there is a meritocratic competition where you can prove and stand out from those billion people, right? Computers were sort of like, I would even say, like the first time, like we as an industry accomplished that. Because before that, like how do you interview or hire someone for normal roles? You sort of look at their resume and like hire someone, right? In computers, it kind of becomes possible to give a constrained test within a short period of time, where like you could try to simulate their brain cells and like see how it's sort of like how they're like running. So I was super lucky to be a part of this sort of movement where you know there was a way by which like Google and Microsoft and all these people figured out like a test on algorithms, test on like how someone's brain sort of solves a problem that they've not seen before from first principles. And I just like really enjoyed that. Like, this was um, you know just like sitting and thinking on a problem for a long period of time and like trying to solve it was just like super fun. And computers were the first job in which you could actually test for it. And I got lucky. I was able to stand out from a billion people in India. Was ranked one in India in top coder and Google Code Jam. And that sort of launched my career, right?
Yeah. Could you share some pivotal experience from your early career that really helped you become who you are today?
Yeah, I mean, I think when I was hiring at Rippling, one of my engineering managers, like he's a XYZ founder as well. His name is Sachin. Actually, we acquired his company at Rippling, and I asked him, okay, what do you hire for? Like, what do you look for? I have a bunch of answers, but his answer was very interesting to me. He looks for confidence, just confidence in people. And I think about that a lot, and like there is a lot of overlap. So like so what were my confidence builders? Like what were like if you look at the career trajectories of like people who go to do like amazing things, you can see not one wins but like a series of success, series of wins, right? Each successive win bigger than the previous one. And that's what like building you the confidence. There is this documentary on like delayed gratification. Like they sort of did this marshmallow test. Have you heard of the marshmallow test?
I love this experiment with kids. They
Yeah.
give them a marshmallow and they tell them like if you wait 5 minutes without eating it, you can have a second one.
Exactly. So I feel like like successful career trajectories go through a marshmallow test themselves. You're like, I was willing to bet on myself that like, hey, maybe I don't need to study for academics, and like maybe I can do this thing called computers. And once that works out, then I'm willing to take a bigger bet on myself. Maybe I don't need to like work at Microsoft. I can go do this thing called Y Combinator, right? And then once that works out, I can sort of take bigger and bigger bets on myself, right? So like Elon didn't sort of like be born Elon. I mean, there's a lot of Elon that is just born Elon, but part of it is also like feedback from these delayed gratification loops, where he sort of like went outside the consensus. Things played out, and he comes back and like makes a bigger bet and a bigger bet, where he's spending more and more and more years outside of consensus. For me, definitely, over time I sort of got the confidence to understand, okay, like that I can bet outside the consensus. Just like don't do things that everyone else is doing where there's a lot of competition. And um, you know and over time I've sort of like recognized this thing about like outlier events, like Six Sigma events or like outlier events. Most events are just like normal events in our life, right? Most events are not material, they don't really matter that much. But then once in a while some extreme outlier events happen in the world. Things like Y Combinator happens, like that's an extreme outlier event. Like Bitcoin happens, that's an extreme outlier event. the founder of Zenefits, which is a $4 billion company, goes out and starts a company. Like that's a fucking extreme outlier event, you know. So there are all these like outlier events. You know, there is a social network that takes off in Cambridge, which has like 1 million users within a month. We cloned it and launched it in Stanford, called, and that's my first successful startup called Like a Little, you know, which got $100 million acquisition offer. Again, it's based on an outlier event that I noticed and I decided to act upon, right? So, you know, over time I sort of like, you know, recognized the importance of just like paying attention to these outlier events, like, you know, and then being available enough to like pay attention to it, and sort of, have the conviction to like take big bets on it, you know. That's kind of like what my early successes kind of gave me, is just look for these sort of world changing extreme rare events that you can actually act upon. I think most of us, like, don't even sort of like notice that we live busy lives, and most of us don't really act on it, like, we go through with our plans for whatever we've been doing.
Thank you. Um, let's move on to Rippling. I think we have a first question, and I think this is a great one to start things off. If Rippling took a year to build, how were you able to build conviction that you were working on the right things during this time? And did you get where did you get validation, and was there any pivoting?
There is no pivoting actually. So again, rippling is an extreme outlier event. I don't think I can sort of create a rippling again, to be honest with you. All I did was to notice that it's a very special event that was happening in the world, and that I can go and act on it. So let me tell you the story of rippling. To understand the story of rippling, you have to understand the story of Zenefits, which came actually before rippling. You know, and what brought me to Zenefits, is by that time I had, like, tried 10 different ideas for startups. Nothing was really working. There was one startup that I cloned and copied, which had $100 million acquisition offer, which also failed, right? So I was like really burnt out. I said, fuck this, I'm not doing any startups anymore. And I was just chilling, and then I saw Zenefits. I thought Zenefits was an extreme outlier event in the world. And we live in an industry called startups, where 1 plus 1 plus 1 equal to 1,000, right? Like, it's not equal to 3. Good team, good market, good traction sort of like compounds extremely quickly into like world dominance. Like, this is a compounding industry that we live in. And I thought Zenefits was an extreme outlier event because, and when something is an outlier event, there are like 100 data points that tell you together that it's an outlier event. You don't need, like, a child could tell you, right? You just need to pay attention and act on it. So Zenefits was an extreme outlier event because, first of all, you know, just externally you could tell, like, they went from zero to $50 million in ARR within 18 months. You know, I don't know if like any other startup that has still done it. It might be like still the top sort of fastest growing company in the world. Period. I mean, there might be some AI companies these days which are able to sort of pull it off. But 18 months of founding $50 million in ARR, like, that is, freaking fast. And to top it off, it was doing it in an industry selling to customers who were deemed unsellable. Okay, like, it was selling to like SMBs, really small shops down the street. Like, these SMBs had no money to pay anyone. Like, so no sales reps time is worth it to go and sell to them. And these guys are like, unsophisticated in technology, like they never buy any software. So it's kind of like crazy that you could sell to these people and be, one of the most money minting iconic companies in the world, right? Like, so there are like multiple rules that got broken to, like, for Zenefits to happen. Now, I can go into details for like why and all that, but like that doesn't matter to the story. you know um, so I noticed that Zenefits was an extreme outlier event, and if you can grow this fast, then it means, you unlock like a massive, massive market. These conditions don't happen that often, and that's why I decided to join Zenefits. I actually was not the founder. I joined as the director of engineering. I helped build much of the engineering team there. And then Parker, who was a CEO, he got fired from Zenefits. The investors actually, like, you know uh, showed him the door. And I so first of all, I quickly noticed that, like, look, Zenefits is not going anywhere. It's the founder really matters to these companies, because the value of a tech company is sort of created 10 years down the line, right? Cash flows 10 years later, like, we are notoriously unprofitable, right? Like, we built things for a long, long, long time, grow it for a long time, and after that, like, cash flows start to show up. So, much of the Zenefits valuation was like, premised on, things working, like a lot of new initiatives that were coming, and when the founder got fired, I knew that those initiatives are not going to happen, and I quit. And I told Parker, look, dude, like, you're going to start, like, obviously Zenefits is dying, it's not really working, no one else is going to do this thing, no one else is like crazy enough to do this shit, because startups can't raise the money to, to go build all this software. So the thesis for Zenefits is like, it's all in one software to run your business. So you need to build a lot of software, to like package an all in one product and like give it to people. So no startups are going to be able to raise the money to go and pull this off. It's going to be hard for us, it's going to be like 100 times hard for anyone else. you know so startups are not going to be a source of competition. The big companies like Gusto and stuff are not going to be a source of competition, because they just sort of like graduated from doing payroll to doing health insurance, right? Like, because they were losing so much business to Benefits, that they had to do this sort of like one extra thing. Are they going to like come out and like follow it up with like 10 extra things? Absolutely not. So no one else was going to do it. There was $100 billion gap in the market. If there was anyone who could do it, like, it's kind of us, actually. I mean, like, if we didn't do it, like, the world is probably not going to have it. you know so I told him, dude, let's go start this company. And he was like, fuck this startup thing, man. I've tried so many startups, nothing's really working, I'm like done, I'm going to Europe. And like, he kind of like left to Europe. Similar to what the state of mind that I was in when my sort of $100 million acquisition fell through. I was like, fuck this startup thing. I've tried so much, nothing's working. Um, so that was the situation when we founded Rippling. Basically, the media and the press sort of threw him under the bus, and like they were sort of banging him up for all the failures of Zenefits. And he felt like the only, I mean, he was under a non-disclosure, and he couldn't talk. Founders can't really talk against their own companies. You're under heavy sort of kind of agreements. So the only way he could talk is to like build another company. So Parker was basically deciding between suicide and like starting Rippling. Like, I mean, he was like pretty broken at that point. He was just playing video games all day all night, watching porn, just like, he's pretty messed up. Um, and that was a situation in which we sort of like founded Rippling. And yeah, I mean, so it took a year to build. It took like actually 18 months to build. We burnt 18 $10 million over 18 months without showing even a dollar of revenue. So it was like a huge, huge, huge build. and um, we knew that was a core rule that we were breaking going in. We knew that the structure of the problem statement is like, okay, the key risk here is like not whether customers want it or not. I mean, we knew they wanted it, we sold $50 million worth of it, right? We knew they wanted it. The key risk tended to be like, can we build it or not? And like, even that is okay, I'm an engineer, I can build anything. We know that we can build whatever, right? So the key risk tended to be like, okay, how much do you need to build before people started buying it? Like, if, I mean, Zenefits was 3 in 1. So if you just like built 3 in 1, like, they could use Zenefits, they could use Gusto, they could use ADP. So when we build 4 in 1, are they going to buy it? When we build 5 in 1, are they going to buy it? Like, how much in one will people buy? So that was the key risk going in at Rippling. So we had, I mean, that was the only play. We had to build conviction and like build a lot of things before we can get a lot of customers. So that was the key risk going in. It was a weird company, it was a different kind of a company, we knew that going in. And that was the opportunity. These days when I build startups, I don't look for like easy things that I can jump over. I look for like deep, hard walls that I can't break through, but there is just like tiny little hole that if I do break through, like, I have this sort of like unique hole, and like there'll be interesting things on the other end if I squeeze through, right? So that was Rippling. I feel like we're in the exceptions business. We need to build, to build $100 billion company, you need to break some key rules of like building startups, right? And we knew what rule we were breaking going in. And like a 2% odds of like building a Rippling is like worth it. It's $100 billion shot at goal.
Wow. Thank you for sharing this. Um, when did you start scaling the team, and do you have any advice on hiring overall? Oh, I think we lost you. Let's wait a few minutes. I'm pretty sure it'll come back.
Hey,
Hey,
Sydney.
you're back. You're back.
Okay, so I was lost, is it?
Yeah, I think we lost you for a minute.
Okay, okay, got it. Cool.
So yeah, my question was, when did you start hiring, and how big was the team when you built the MVP, and what do you look for when you hire engineers?
Yeah, so I mean, of course, we started as two people, two co-founders. Actually, there was a third co-founder who left halfway. In month three, he had some medical issues. He's a successful founder now. He's like founder of $100 million valued company. So he didn't do too badly. That's the thing about the valley. Like all the people that I hung out with, they're all like pretty doing pretty well. Of course he would have made like $1 billion if he had stayed, but not so bad, right? So it started off with like three co-founders, and then we kept sort of hiring, we kept scaling. We had 5 to 10 people in the US, maybe 15, 20 people in Bangalore. And over time we sort of scaled Bangalore a lot more than the US. So like my hiring philosophy is like you know we hired like exceptional people in the US. Like a lot of people we hired early on were like XYC founders actually. uh, you know I think there is a dearth of that kind of talent anywhere else in the world. The opportunity cost of those kinds of people are like $1 million a year in different job comps, right? So it is a high opportunity cost. These people are expensive, but like they're worth it. They sort of share the load of founding a company actually. So we hired exceptional people in the US, and then good senior engineering talent we just hired in Bangalore. So yeah, we kept sort of growing. When we did have our first dollar of revenue, I believe we were like 25 engineers, maybe like 7 or 8 in the US and the rest in India. And there is just like Parker, like there's no non-technical role. Everyone else was just engineers. um, you know
I love it.
uh,
I love
so
technical teams like that.
yeah, yeah. So that's how for the most of the life of the company it kind of looked. What kind of people do I hire? So typically, in any startup, I've sort of been around startups for long enough, like 10, 15 years. One thing that's true is like founders just hire people like themselves. Like a startup is like an organism. It's founders are the stem cell of the organism, and like it sort of cell divides and cell divides and cell divides, right? um, so founders always hire people like themselves. And like for me, when I hired engineers, I was trying to clone myself. The best clones are like XYZ founders who are also like good engineers who could get a job at Google and something. We had a bunch of those people in the early founding team. And then you sort of sacrifice on some skills to like get some other skills. We maybe like sacrificed on entrepreneurial skills to buy some programming contest skills. People with like high CPU over in India. So that's kind of how we balanced it.
Okay, cool, interesting. Um, so the next question: how's your role as a CTO evolved, and when did you start doing non-coding activities as a primary thing? Like, when did you start coding?
Yeah. um, so Rippling was a very different company. I had hired people who were like as good or better than me, right? Like our employee number one was an ex YC founder who had sold his company. for a couple of $1 million, 2 3 million dollars. So he was not, he was like pretty good, right? So he didn't need any management or anything like that, and we were able to hire a bunch of tap into a bunch of that kind of talent early on. So again, the core risk for Rippling is like, we had to build multiple different softwares at the same time and execute on all of them. So these guys were running, each running one of the businesses. So one guy was heading payroll, one guy was heading health insurance, and so on, right? So it didn't quite require like a typical sort of like a manager employee relationship. It was more of an assistance relationship. My role as a CTO early on was, I kind of like code reviewed everyone's code, and I wrote some common infrastructure like that, that I knew everyone would require, based on my experience at Zenefits. So I was like writing the common infrastructure. How do you sort of share things across different apps? And I had a bunch of experience doing that at Zenefits because we knew what was missing, what was breaking. So I focused on that, and like other people built these other business lines. And my co-founder Parker was dealing with them directly. He was the product manager for all of the early things that we were building. So he didn't go through me. Like he was just like talking to these people directly and like spawning off those businesses, right? So it was a great sort of collaboration and a partnership more than it's like a manager employee kind of a relationship. Early on, and like for a good part of Rippling, building Rippling. um, when did I stop coding? Um, I don't know. Over time, it just like kept reducing. I still code reviewed once in a while. There is a large part of Rippling code base that I sort of wrote the first piece of code for, and there are nuances and like things that come up. I code reviewed from time to time. Yeah, it's very gradually. I don't know if there was a point in time when it totally stopped. In fact, even when I left Rippling, I was still code reviewing. A bunch of things people were pinging me on. So it just like kept getting lower and lower, you know yeah, over time, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. You talked about common infrastructure that you built. Could you share some insight, some architectural insight and decision that you took that facilitate Rippling ability to scale and manage multiple products at once?
Yeah, absolutely. We just knew like what broke at Zenefits, what was not sort of breaking when things scaled at Zenefits. For example, we had like multiple designers, each designer working on like separate parts of the product, and like the products were getting inconsistent. In Rippling, the first month, we had all the key components laid out. A lot of HR software is just like a bunch of forms, and like user going through these forms, and like a bunch of like validations that show up in these forms, and like progressive loading of those validations, and like being able to checkpoint and come back to those stuff. So we built a bunch of those stuff early on. A bunch of HR software is just like having these common models, having this sort of employee data in one place with the right fields that any other app can augment certain fields over. But then they can't like mess up this database. Like there is not a copy of this data anywhere else. So just getting that architecture right. We knew these were the things that were breaking at Zenefits, and we had to like build in so that, look, like one of the modules could go out and get a customer by itself, and then when the customer buys these other modules, the transition is pretty seamless. Each module doesn't have like its own copy of data, or like they represent data in the same way. you know and what should be optional and what should be required, all that sort of consistency is putting those things together. The other thing that broke was like reporting. You had to have the data in like a central discoverable format, so that a customer can run any kind of reports that they want. And you need to be able to understand, okay, this data belongs to this app. So when they uninstall this app, this data is like no longer like necessary. So you just need to like there were a bunch of things like that broke at Rippling, which we were just like able, sorry, broke at Zenefits, which we were
Yeah.
able to architect for it at Rippling. And it was also important like what we didn't architect for. Like I was pretty opinionated that it's not going to have like microservices here and there. It's all going to be a fucking monolith. People are not going to like over engineer. People are not going to find their own stack to write their product on. Everything was going to be written on one single stack, one single database. It's just like opinionated. Don't innovate on like the technical parts. We only innovate on the business and market share parts of things. So that was also like I think it's like was pretty important to the success of the company.
Interesting. And are there anything you put in place for engineering efficiency and velocity at Rippling, especially when you started scaling to like hundreds of engineers?
Yeah, definitely. Um, like processes evolved as we scaled. I think when I left Rippling, there are only like 100, 200 engineers, so that was sort of like my limit of what I saw.
Okay.
um, you know Definitely things that were super helpful early on were, we didn't have any customer support, as I told you. Like for a while, even when we are like at a $2 million ARR, we had zero customer support. So what we had to do was, we had to like route the customer support tickets directly to the inboxes of engineers working on that product, right?
Wow.
So, you know we built a very simple Bayesian model to like classify the email and like route it to the right engineer, so that the engineer directly sort of like fixes the problem and responds to support, right? It was like super important, I think, in helping us scale pretty fast, because again, that was a mistake that we did at Zenefits, where you know like a lot of bugs kept accumulating, and engineers were just like building new product features or something, instead of fixing those bugs. That just giving people like full visibility on the game, and like having people sort of like directly handle the issue, and like sort of decentralizing quite a bit, like that was an important process for us. Um, like early on, that definitely helped us scale and like be on top of customer issues. um, um, yeah, in general, like a lot of philosophies of Rippling were around like decentralization. How do we decentralize a lot of these decision making, so that it can sort of go to that engineer, because that was what Rippling did very well early on. That was the DNA of Rippling, which is, we were able to build five businesses at once, because there were like these XYZ founders acting as CEOs of those businesses, right? If everything sort of like came back to Parker, like it would slow down quite a bit. um, and we try to sort of like push it downstream, even into the engineers that they were hiring. So that kind of helped us go quite far.
Thank you. We have a few questions on how do you prioritize, how do you choose whether you um, focus on specific product, and how do you um, decide on building a new product. How did you do all of this? Like, how did you decide? I'm going to bring up this question, but yeah, how did you decide on what feature to develop? And how did you have a product roadmap in mind, or did you like listen to customers and decide on the go? What was the vision here?
Yeah. Um, so I mean, I think Rippling again is a very weird company in the sense that, like, we did know of the product roadmap. We had like decent idea of like product roadmap pretty far into the future, right? Like, again, Zenefits had worked at like, um, at a fairly big scale. So we kind of did know that, like, um, what we need to build, and almost in like what sequence even. So we had like a decent roadmap for like 5 years into the future, just based on like our experiences at Zenefits, like what gives how much value to the customer, what are the big pain points and like different spaces. So you know um, so that certainly informed the product roadmap early on. um, you know um, so we had like very little ambiguity on that stuff. Of course, you have to react to the customer, you have to react to the market. So there are cases where we did react to the market. So for example, like, I mean, Rippling is like is a reasonably fast growing company, and like a lot of times, we accelerated growth by reacting to the market. So for example, there was a time when early on, um, we noticed a trend in the market that lots and lots of companies are like hiring a bunch of contractors, but the existing payroll solutions suck at paying contractors. Like, these guys are not like one time contractors, they're like going to be paid on a recurring basis, and there are no like good existing tooling to like pay these guys, to pay these contractors on a recurring basis, right? So we noticed that problem in the market, and we sort of like built a product that's like 10x better than anyone else in the market. And we like heavily advertised to like companies who like who might be hiring a lot of contractors, right? And we got a lot of growth from doing that. So you do have a roadmap and a vision, but oftentimes like markets do present some interesting opportunities. Another example of that is like during COVID, we built a product where we were already building, handling IT for companies. So what that means is when a new employee joins you, like we would ship a computer to the office admin, and the office admin can unbox the computer and give it to the new employee. And when you unbox it, it'll all the right software will get installed into it, like antivirus, device encryption, like whatever sort of Slack or whatever you configure will get installed into it, right? Now during COVID, we had to make this architecture change where, like instead of shipping it to the admin, you ship it directly to the employee, right? And then now when the employee gets fired, instead of the admin collecting the laptop and keeping it at home, you need to ship a shipping box to the employee, and the employee ships it to your warehouse where we Rippling collect and keep it, right? So those are like unique situations that arise during COVID. And we act on it, we get a bunch of growth from it, and so on and so forth, right? So there are sometimes like small opportunities like that, which are like tiny detours in the market that you can take to like massively accelerate your growth, that we took from time to time. But other than that, we kind of like had a decent sense of like what the customer pain points were. And so there are two ways to build companies, right? Like there is top down and bottom up. Both of them are necessary. Top down, we kind of like had a decent idea what the customer pain points were, and like which products resonated more with the customers, right? And then you also have to do a good job bottom up and reacting to the market, which is when customer support tickets are routed to engineers, they understand, okay, what are the actual like right now pain points that people are feeling, and engineers themselves go and solve it. So like that helps out, helps some of the reactivity that the company needs to do with the market. And then and then midway you also sort of like discover, oh, there are these sort of interesting time warps or escalators that you can take to like save time, right? To accelerate growth. So those are all sort of like tools in the arsenal.
Thank you. And towards before you left Rippling, did you decide on building AI features or like other technologies? Um,
No, I actually left Rippling during COVID. So it was like
okay,
it was pre-dawn of AI. So, I mean,
okay,
obviously Sam Altman is a decent acquaintance. He's been around YC for like more than a decade. And he was the biggest investor in Rippling, probably the second investor in Rippling. So
wow.
we know each other pretty well. And he was still a crazy guy. When I left Replying, he was still like a weird guy. He came home for dinner one day and I was like, dude, like OpenAI is like just mind-blowing. And then after that, like I mean, he was still crazy. OpenAI was pretty still crazy at that time. And then after that is when hell broke loose with AI, right? Like, so it is now an industry. So kudos to him. I mean, obviously he's like sort of become another Elon Musk at this point. But yeah, there was no AI and stuff at that time. When I
Do
was,
you use? Please go on.
yeah, when I was leaving Rippling, I was thinking, I would probably go and expand Rippling internationally to like a lot of different countries, because there are a lot of Rippling for India or like Rippling for Europe that were getting funded by often by our own investors. They all saw how amazing a business this is, and they went and funded Rippling for Europe and all that stuff in different parts of the globe. So and they made it shared customer feedback with us and made it clear they want us to build it. So I was thinking, I would probably build that, but then took a break for a while and then fell in love with crypto and like now building a crypto company. But that's what I was thinking about. I was not thinking about AI at that time.
Do you use ChatGPT yourself?
Yeah, of course, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you use it for? To code or to like write emails?
All of that. I mean, not to write emails. My emails are very short, so not to write emails, but to
I
code, yes.
noticed that.
When I get stuck on something, it definitely sort of helps me out. It gives me some decent pointers, and I ask a lot of questions. I have a 7-year-old son now. We're like curious all the time. Like um, he says like iguanas can walk on water. I'm like, really? Can iguana? Like, so we explore a lot with ChatGPT.
Okay. Maybe we can talk about your current business. How's it going, and what is your view of the future of ZeroX people?
Yeah. So ZeroX people is basically, we're building the Google for Web3. So we go out and index all the blockchains. So, there is a proliferation of blockchains. Blockchains are public databases. So we go out and index all the blockchains and make it like more human readable and more accessible. So you can come sign up with your Twitter. We locate your friends on chain, no matter which chain they're using. We try our best to like locate them on chain. You can see what apps they're using, what are they doing inside these apps. We use LLMs to like make it a lot more human readable. So you can see, your couple of YC buddies are like using these different apps, and you can go try those apps out if you want. So ultimately, we want to be the homepage of Web3. Um, you know, uh, I fundamentally think, I mentioned a few different Six Sigma events which I caught, like YC and Zenefits and Rippling and Bitcoin, and I sort of see crypto as like one of the important six extreme outlier events that is happening in society. um, it's kind of like 100x bigger than YC in my opinion. Um, um, and like the internet, which is like huge actually, like 95% of the reason I got like fabulously wealthy is just due to the internet. Being one of the most important innovations of humans, like after language, we're able to exchange ideas like very very quickly. And Rippling cornered a valuable sort of real estate on the internet, right? Like if you're starting an internet company, you better use Rippling. If you're buying some internet software, you're probably buying it via Rippling. So Rippling sort of cornered some valuable real estate on the internet, just like Stripe did. I think the internet is going through a fundamental rewrite right now. In the future, you and I are not going to be building companies, we are going to be building protocols. you know so fundamentally there is a new rewrite with Web3. And like in 10 years, like most of the software that we are going to be using will just be decentralized. You don't need to like run companies on like a centralized MySQL server where you have the root access to, you run your own servers. It's just going to be a different architecture. And and I think I can go deeper into that, but my fundamental sort of like belief which I saw is like Web3 is going to be huge, and internet, which is the most important innovation for humanity, is going to get fundamentally rewritten in a different rails. Like protocols are the new companies. And and I saw that like now we could actually build and we could participate in the creation of the new internet. Like I wasn't alive when the United States Constitution was written, but I was alive when the internet was rewritten. Like I could participate in a serious way. So that's the game here. We want to be the homepage of Web3. We make Web3 like a lot easier to use for people. And this hopefully becomes the primary discovery platform where you find new apps, find what people are your friends are doing in these apps and go use them.
Super cool. And how far along are you on the product today, user wise and product features wise?
Yeah, we've been building for the last couple of years, 2.5 years. So I've been building through the bear market. I've put in millions of dollars of my own capital. This thing is expensive, indexing the whole of Web3.
Definitely.
And we have like a team of like 25 30 engineers. We kind of like came out somewhat around like 4 to 6 months ago. We came out and like started onboarding users. We have around a couple of thousand users using the product. Obviously it's a consumer social product, and for me the key metrics are like retention and stuff like that. It's retaining users pretty well. So week 8 week 12 retention are like 25%. It's sort of flatlining at that number. So users are coming back, they're liking the product, they're using the product. If yesterday actually, like there was a campaign on Twitter by our users who love the product. They were talking. There was like a thing that went viral. You can check out my Twitter. Where our users were like, just like talking about ZeroX people, which is a huge bar, right? Like that's what YC taught me. Is like to sort of create like few hundred users who really love you, and that's where we
Mhm.
are at this point. The users love the product. We have a wait list of around 20,000, 30,000 users. So slowly onboarding people. And that's kind of where we are. So our job now is to like continue retaining users, fix issues, and like keep growing it. And the game here is to get like some 20-30% of all Web3 users using the product.
Super cool. Thank you for sharing this. If you had to reflect on the leadership lesson that you've learned, that you would like to pass on other CTOs, what would they be?
Um, um, I think um, I think a lot of CTOs here probably understand this. There are so basically when you're a founder, you always have to have two opposing ideas in your mind, and both are true at the same time, and you have to like make trade-offs between those two opposing ideas, right? So everything's a contradiction. The specific set of contradictions that matter for CTOs are on one hand, technology just doesn't matter. It's a commodity. Like that's sort of my opinion and position when I sort of took made an opinionated view that like each rippling business should all use the same stack. No one should be innovating on technology. We use the same database, we use the same task system, we use the same sort of like serving system. Nobody innovates that, right? So on one hand, like technology is a commodity, and you shouldn't sort of spend a lot of time trying to like optimize that and like solve that. And it's a tool for the job, like get the job done, like focus on business. um, you know um, that is absolutely true. It sort of even extends into like my view on like technical debt. I believe technical debt never needs to get paid. If you're paying off technical debt, something's wrong with you. Because you know um, you know like basically you just have to make sure the technical debt does not compound. you know like you just like rename some functions as like deprecated, you move some functions in different files, so that like it's clear that like people are not building on like on the trashy parts of the code base, and like things don't get more and more trashy. But then if you do your job well as a startup founder, what should happen is like that your company should grow, it should compound, there should be more engineers tomorrow than in the past. you know there should be more code written in the future than in the past. So you can just like you don't need to fix the past, you can just fix the trajectory. And the past sins will be a lesser and lesser percentage of the entirety of the code base that's written. So I even sort of take this extreme view on like technology as a commodity, that I don't even pay tech debt, I don't give people time to pay tech debt. I just like reformat it. I just do the architecture, sort of like move some files around and move on. I don't pay it. So
Interesting.
on one hand, you have to sort of like assume and understand that tech is a commodity and it's a tool for the job. On the other hand, here's the contradiction. On the other hand, what is simultaneously true is we are in the R&D business. Okay, unless you build something that is like fundamentally different, unless you build something that like no one else will be building if not for you, unless it's like a hard technical problem as well, you know you don't have a shot. We are the sort of decentralized R&D department for the world. So we are here to like solve deep hard R&D problems. And we shouldn't shy away and take shortcuts on those. um, so it is a delicate and important trade-off. You kind of need to know at least like what are the few areas where you're willing to like double down and triple down, right? And it's like super important to identify those areas in this day and age, because we live in an age of extreme technological leverage. So I always keep telling my engineers, look, Facebook can be built in 1 hour, in 1 day, or by 1,000 engineers over 10 years, right? Like all of those things, you just like slightly changes what Facebook is, but you like all of those three things are like simultaneously true, right? And it's harder and harder for the end consumer to tell the difference, because technology is like providing so much leverage. There are all these sort of like mini trade-offs that you can hide, that the user cannot easily see underneath the surface, that gives you like tons and tons of leverage, right? um, so you really need to like understand like at what log level of the spectrum you want to invest in, right? uh, and that's why technology companies don't sort of sit and decide, okay, how many engineers do I need to build this product? All of us, we sit and ask how many engineers can I afford? And that's how we hire, right? Like we sort of like ask, okay, a customer has like a problem tree. um, it's a fractal. You can keep expanding as much as you can afford to. And with a certain level of expansion, you better hit product market fit or you're toast, right? Like that's how we think about it. So you do have like lots and lots of leverage, and it's like logarithmic. Like if you double the number of engineers, your impact is not really doubled, even for the best companies in the world, right? So I think that's one of the sort of core contradictions of this business is like, you have to like not take yourself seriously. You have to take the aggressive sort of like logarithmic trade-offs, do 80/20s aggressively, and like keep shipping things, keep adding value to the customer. But once in a while, you do need to like solve like really hard problems. If there is no hard problems you're solving, then you're not doing your job as the R&D department for the world.
I love that image, being the R&D for the world. Thank you for sharing this. We have a few minutes left. I'm gonna pick up some questions from the audience. Um, there is this one. I think this is interesting to talk about conflict between co-founders. Um, what was the biggest disagreement you and Parker had early, and how did you work through it?
Um, I feel like, there's going to be like a weird answer because I would say like there weren't many actually. There were probably none, to be honest with you.
Okay,
Um, because the Parker and me relationship is not a normal co-founder relationship. I mean, he was my boss before, so you kind of know who's going to like tie break already going in. And it was 60/40. He had 60% equity and his equity voted 10x. So we knew going in that he's the boss, he's going to call the shots. you know and we both wanted to win, but that's about it, right? It's kind of like a Warren Buffett Charlie Munger relationship. Warren is not asking Charlie permission to buy stocks. He's going to buy. Charlie can complain, but like he's going to buy. So I think the expectations were fairly clearly set that there wasn't possibly like too many disagreements that can occur from this one.
cool. Yeah, and I think this question is more about like how do you handle like disagreements with like other team members, especially maybe even in your current company. You probably sometimes have disagreements. So how do you deal with them?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So um, so there are a few thoughts that come to mind. I mean, first of all, bigger picture, startup is like one series of startup is just like a series of like bad things happening to you every day, right? Like that's how building startups are. Like shit breaks all the time, like people quit all the time, and things sort of like blow up all the time. It's just like the life sucks as a startup founder. It's like every day you wake up and like you hear no's, 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 right? Like you lose trust, and like life sucks. This is what we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and it doesn't change. Like I recently met Parker and he's like, yeah, that's life. It's still even at Rippling, it's kind of like that for him. So to some extent, we live in an industry where there will be like high employee turnover. Your employees will be quitting all the time. you know um, you know um, that's part of the job. um, Over time, one thing that I've sort of realized, and like I've learned this from Parker and like started doing better, is just on one hand, you want your employees to like innovate for you. You want to sort of decentralize the thinking, and tell them, frame the problem statement, frame the biggest problems, and enable your organization to come up with solutions for it and like go and solve it. On one hand, you want to tap into the creativity of the decentralized company that you're building. um, um, and to maximize that, you want to sort of like take your mental model, take your framework of like how you see the problem and the solution, and like what are some of the sort of key thoughts, or like key beliefs that guide your decision making. They might, a lot of them might be wrong, like but you just like lived through some life experiences that these are the set of bets that you want to make with this company, right? And you sort of propagate it. You talk about it out in the open. Like mission, vision, values, culture, all those are like you know different ways of putting the same thing, which is your job as a founder is to like try and understand the program that's running in your head, and try and see if you can replicate it, copy paste it into your employees. And that is kind of how you sort of handle disagreements to some extent, is whether you sort of try to figure out the diff between the program that's running in your head with the program that's running in the other person's head, and you try to confront the diff. you know Now oftentimes, people understand that, look, ultimately the diff is going to get broken at Parker's head. These are a set of beliefs. This is how this company operates. It has some advantages. It's not right all the time. It has some advantages and it has some disadvantages. And you know like ultimately, if you frame it like that, like, people kind of have a much more of a palatable experience understanding why decisions are made in a certain way, versus who's more powerful and who can make decisions and stuff.
I loved your engineer way of thinking about problems. I think it's really it talks to the audience here. So thank you for sharing this. I think we're going towards the end of this webinar. Is there anything we can do to help you in your current venture, or anything you would like to say before we wrap this up?
No, I mean, great meeting all of you guys. I would sort of share my contact information here. Maybe you guys can feel free to reach out if you have any questions or thoughts or comments. Nice to connect with all of you guys. So this is my email, um, and this is my signal. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. And are you okay if we put this recording online?
Sure, sure.
Okay, great. Thank you so
Cool.
much, and have a good day.